joining us now for some analysis of those election results as they come in. Is political analyst Tasneem Essop. Tasneem, once again, a very good morning to you. It's now the second day after elections, and it's interesting to see the kinds of projections we're seeing now. I saw quite a cheeky tweet from Didi Trabi, who said, "Has Jesus come?"
Well, I mean, that's a bit of a throwback to the
Isn't it?
Till Jesus comes comment. Yeah, look, I mean, the IEC said we'd be at 90%, well, by
midnight last night. Yeah.
We aren't there yet, so we're still waiting, but the projections are coming in and the picture is clearing up, right? We know where we're going to have hung municipalities. We know there's going to be a lot of them. So coalition talks are on. All of that's going to get started now. What's still to remain, in some parts it might dramatically shape the results, but I think we're pretty settled with where we are in terms of those hung municipalities and coalition governments.
Shall we take a look at some of the projections from Davish Folks this morning?
Let's do it.
He's actually just updated it a few minutes ago.
Right.
Particularly in Johannesburg and Tshwane. Let's begin in Johannesburg. He's projecting there with News 24, the ANC coming in at 33%. That will be down 8% from 2016. The DA second with, did I say we were talking about Tshwane or Johannesburg?
You said Johannesburg, but let's
right.
go.
Let me just put a mark there so that I don't lose my train of thought. So the DA in Johannesburg, 27%, losing about 11% there. The surprise for Johannesburg is that Action SA is now the third biggest party according to these projections, overtaking the EFF. Is it a surprise?
Well, I mean, it would be a surprise, yes, if Action SA takes over the EFF in the city of Johannesburg. I think that would be very interesting. I would have put Action SA lower than that before the election.
Yeah.
So I think the kind of result that they've had is very positive for them, and it's very interesting for Joburg and what it says about the kind of shift in politics, right? So, I mean, I said yesterday, look, Action SA can't be spoken about as a national kind of party. It's contesting 6 areas around the country. So we have to zone in on that. And they really have focused their campaign on Gauteng in particular, right? And I think we need to sort of start looking at what this means about the electorate and where this is going, right? I mean, part of it is what was Herman Mashaba campaigning on, and Herman Mashaba very much the face of Action SA, and really who we are looking at when we're looking at Action SA, right?
Yeah.
So what they're campaigning on, his profile as coming out as a mayor from the 2016 elections of the Democratic Alliance, and really building a sort of national profile for himself, despite only contesting really in Gauteng and KZN.
Yeah.
But really the kind of figure that he is and what he represents. So if you look at kind of Action SA's posters, hatful with politics and that kind of thing, right? It's this kind of like not politics, right? So Herman Mashaba calls himself a politician, but then there's all of these posters, hatful with politics and so on. So for me, it follows global trends around, these political characters that are not from traditional sort of political bases, certainly in South Africa. I mean, Herman Mashaba might have come in through the DA, but was not a long-standing political figure with the DA or any of the major parties, and comes in on a kind of not anti-politics perspective.
I want to just take us to the leaderboard there, and as we say, just 58% of the vote tallied by the IEC so far. Independents there registering about 1.58, shall we call it 1.6% of the votes. Other parties, 8.42%. I just wonder whether we would have expected a better performance from independents.
So, I mean, it depends where you look, right? There were areas that I was looking at last night where independents have performed well. And by that, I mean going from 1.2% to 3%, right? That's a big shift for independents. So there are those areas. There's also areas I was looking at, particularly areas where there have been protests and a lot of disgruntlement around particular issues. I was looking at Makana, for example, where the Makana Citizens Forum, I don't want to get that wrong, was contesting, and they were sitting at, I did write it down, when I checked, Yeah, they were sitting at 18% when I last checked that, right?
And that's huge.
That's huge. In Maluti Apofong, you have the MAP 16, which is a civic movement that contested elections. They were sitting also at somewhere around there. Independents were up from 1.2 to 3.12% in Limpopo. So all of this is very interesting, right? So I'm looking at those areas where there have been challenges, where there have been protest action, where there have been movements, civic movements, social movements that have come into the fray. And yes, they might not be winning an election, right? But it does start to tell us something. So just like we're talking about Action SA in Johannesburg, who aren't winning the election, but they have done well, there are also all of these other configurations that are happening around the country, right? The difference, of course, in Joburg, it's going to be a coalition municipality. So that's the big sway, is that all of these smaller parties or newer parties are going to have a say.
Yeah, hung municipalities will be the order of the day. Tasneem Essop, thanks very much for joining us on the early morning edition of the AM Report. Political analysis there with Tasneem Essop.